Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all colors, races, and creeds. Welcome back to the greatest show on earth, the Investigative Journal, on this Friday. Greg Anthony here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And today I want to finish up with a story I've been doing all week, part 3. And it's about the Serbian Genocide between 1941 and 1944. And the Vatican and the Jesuit Franciscan connection to this. And it's a story that will never be told. And the reason is that this story has been kept from the people in America, the Vatican, Jesuit-led New World Order, because those are the people behind the scenes that are pulling the strings of most everything in Washington, D.C. and around the world. And if you're wondering why it never seems to be anything getting done in Washington, D.C., that's why. And it's the Hegelian dialectic. The Democrats and Republicans work together. Even though they sit on different sides of the aisle and preach very different things, they work together. And you're watching now the culmination of the Democratic Globalist Party now, the Socialist Globalist Party, against the Republican Nationalist Party. And you're seeing America being divided into two sections, 50-50. And they're going to battle together. And you know who's going to win? I'm going to tell you right now. The globalists. Yes, that's why you never see them being brought to justice in the House and the Senate, or anywhere in our judicial system. People like Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and this whole gang of what would they call the deep state has been protected for years and years and years, we can go all the way back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The left wing in this country has always been there for this culmination of socialism coming to our country to destroy the remnants of America, of freedom, of sovereignty. And the real sad thing is that the Republicans in the House and Senate are in on it. Oh, the lower level guys may not know anything, but you can bet that the people at the top do. Let me give you an example. Right now you're seeing the biggest hypocrisy going on in Washington, D.C., and the reason they're playing out this game of Russian collusion against Trump and all his followers, the reason that Hillary Clinton said that Trump followers are just a basket of deplorables, that's why they call them, these smelly Walmart people. They want to bring everybody that follows Trump or wants to have really a good America into this group so that they can battle against all of the people on the globalist side that they're collecting now. And you're seeing it play out right before your very eyes. Now in Washington, D.C., they're calling for impeachment on Trump, but they have no evidence for it. I mean, I just listened yesterday to the, I think it's the House Intelligence Committee, and the head of that, I believe, is Adam Schiff. And he gave an opening statement where he actually made up what Trump said. And then he said that's the reason we should impeach Donald Trump. And on the other side of the coin, I'm not going to get into the story, in depth because you've heard about it. On the other side of the coin, you have all these crimes that they've committed. Joe Biden doing his quid pro quo. And I'm tired of hearing that word. Let's just say it means in Latin this for that. So let's just say that. Okay? This for that. So he violates that as a vice president and really strong arms the Ukrainian government to drop a case where the prosecutor was going to investigate his son, who was given a job on a Ukrainian oil company that is being investigated for wrongdoing and criminal doing, and he was getting like $50,000 to $80,000 a month, $3 million checks going through money laundering operations through the Caymans, etc. And Biden, hearing that there was going to be investigation while he was vice president, called the Ukrainian president, who's no longer there, the corrupt Ukrainian, that regime is gone. And he said, listen, if you don't get rid of this prosecutor in 6 hours, we're not going to give you $1 billion in aid. Now, if that's not a this for that, nothing is. So he does that. Nobody investigates it, and they blame Trump for talking to the new president about possibly looking into the origins of, the Russian hoax that they put on for the last 2 years where there was no evidence. And now they want to impeach him for a telephone call. So this is how lopsided it's got, while every one of these people on their side, going down from, James Clapper, John Brennan, all the heads of the CIA, the DOJ, we had Rob Rosenstein, we had people getting fired from the FBI, Jim Comey, the head of the FBI, because they're all working on the deep state to get rid of nationalism in America. Now, you're seeing all these subpoenas coming down from the House because they're controlled by Democrats, correct? But why don't you see the same vigor in the Senate, controlled by Republicans? Where are these Republicans who should be subpoenaing all these people to get to the bottom of it, but they do nothing? And the reason is they work together. And sorry to say, they're going to say one thing and do another. Now, let's talk about the media a minute, then I'm going to get back to my story. I want to finish about the Serbian Genocide and show you the Vatican connection to this and how they've been connected to genocides for hundreds of years, how they're involved now in our governmental activities, their financial activities. I mean, this is a huge, huge story that never gets any coverage. And you're hearing now from the right-wing journalists on Fox and others saying that there's no freedom of the press. They've taken it away. And now all you're seeing is the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all these CNN and all these left-wing outlets really just lying, never giving you the facts, making up stories, and basically silencing the right-wing nationalists. Now, that is going on, but the problem is that the real people that are being silenced are those that really want to get to the truth, going beyond that story, going beyond this fight between the left and the right, actually putting the Hegelian dialectic right out there for people to understand and to show you the hypocrisy, because those people in the media as well work together. And they each play their role. One covers the right-wing stories, the others covers the left-wing stories. And they battle and they battle and battle, and nothing ever gets out. The truth, then, is hidden. They keep everybody occupied with this fight. They've been doing this, the people behind the scenes, the Vatican Jesuits who've been controlling other countries, doing these things for hundreds of years, are just teaching these young boys here in America. Because I always said, people like Jimmy Carter, people like Clinton, people like Bush, people like Trump, these guys aren't smart enough to come up with this stuff. They're not. And that goes for the Senate and the Congress. They have to go to their masters, the people who I'm talking about, that have been doing this for hundreds of years. And so they hide behind the papacy, right? And basically in secret work this kind of Hegelian dialectic worked their magic, so to speak, to create what they want in the end, which is a one-world government, a one-world order. And in the meantime, a lot of good people out there, and many of them came on my show over the years. Many of the books that we've cited here back in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century pointed out how the Vatican operates. How about the stories we did about the Vatican's connection to Abraham Lincoln's death? How about the Vatican's connection to the Revolutionary War in America? How about many, many other connections that never get talked about? So remember that when you're listening to people on TV or in the newspapers now, you're only getting the story they want you to hear. And never has there been more of a battle between these two groups, who really are good buddies, than now. Because what that shows me is we're nearing the point where something's got to give, so to speak. And if you think that nationalism and sovereignty is going to win, forget it. This is kind of like the last hurrah. That's why you see the same arguments fight, the left and the right fighting over the Second Amendment. Fighting really over the open borders versus, every country has a right to protect its borders. Except America? We're supposed to not? Yeah, that's what they say. And then we have all these younger Congress people coming in now, pushing for socialism, and the old guard, especially like Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, just in name, they're bending to all these young socialists because that's exactly what their Jesuit Vatican handlers want them to do. And yesterday I heard on one of the cable shows, they were talking about how the CIA has changed over the years, and it started under Harry Truman. Well, really the function of the CIA was the OSS, and got its roots way back, right after World War II. And it started out, you can see the connection between Rome, if you go back to some of my old shows, and people like Wild Bill Donovan and a couple others who were instrumental in creating the CIA. And Rome had a big deal in this, and you bet, because that was right around the time of the Vatican ratlines, which we'll get into today. Okay, so there's just a quick overview of what you're seeing playing out in Washington. And like I've always said, it's great theater. That's really all it is. All these people are nothing but actors. They're playing a part. And they're put into this kind of movie set, and they're told every day what to say, what to do, and the plots always continue, right? Never getting anything done in Washington. I mean, there's so many things going on in America now that could be fixed so easily. But they don't. And this is geared for that. They want this country to come to a standstill eventually. Right now you're seeing a build-up, and the rich are getting richer. But I'll tell you, when the fall comes, it's going to be hard and fast. Okay, so we have these stage actors, and the best ones right now are Donald Trump. He's a great actor, doing his part. Then you have on the other side, you have Joe Biden. He's back for a performance. He's been on the stage now for 30 to 40 years. I think he'd get tired and retire. I was thinking the other day, this perversion that you're seeing in our society, this idea now that governments are passing laws stating that you can decide what sex you are, and you can wake up one day, a man, biologically, and feel like you're a woman, and then go into all these places that women go to, and that's just fine because you've decided you're a woman. Or maybe you want to join, the women's athletics. You see that a lot now. Men getting into women athletics and winning everything, because they are basically women. So we have this kind of perversion going on, even a perversion of the sexes. And they're telling children this, that you can determine who you are. So basically, if you have a child and you tell him he's a boy, that doesn't wash well with the state, right? Who's saying, no, the child can determine who or what he is. And so they've even got on some applications now a third sex, something, gender neutral, whatever the hell that means. But on this show, we only allow people to listen who really understand that biologically that's what you're going to be your whole life. So if you're out there listening and you're a biological man and today you think you're a woman, just get off the air. Just don't listen. I don't even want you to listen on this show. And if you're a woman and you think today you're a man, please don't listen. You're not allowed to listen to this show. But when you come to your senses and realize that, your mommy and daddy were right when they told you you were a girl and you were born biologically a girl, then you can listen. And the same goes for any guy out there told by your dad and mom you're a boy. You grew up playing boy sports. Don't change. You can't change. So those are the people that can listen here. So what I'm getting at is this perversion that's going on in our society right now is orchestrated. Everything is orchestrated. I remember we got into a big argument one time with people when I used to do this show. We talked about, I did a whole number of shows on the New Age movement. Everybody was into the New Age movement. So my first question was, who created the New Age movement? And so I kind of led them into a trap because I already knew. And they were going like, all these names. I said, no. Did you ever hear of a Jesuit priest by the name of Pierre de Chardin? Oh, and they go, what? Who's he? So I started giving facts. He's a mentor. He's well respected by Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. And let me tell you something. That guy, look him up. And you read his writings, he was the father of the New Age movement. So they pushed people into this kind of movement. And somebody then said, well, doesn't the Vatican want to cut their heads off, just like they did in Serbia, to make them become Orthodox or Catholics instead of Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox Christians? No. Here they're doing it a little differently. They're infiltrating all of these groups, all of our Protestant churches, all of our religions in this country, and basically playing this game, playing this ecumenical game of the ecumenical movement. You've heard of it, where they embrace everybody, but in the meantime they're infiltrating and changing doctrine so there's no protest against Rome. And so they're easily putting a big net out there for everybody to fall into. And they are pulling, creating this stuff. So basically, what we're getting at here is that they have total control over the way you think, eat, walk, do whatever, think about it. There's not one thing I can think about that if you don't start thinking about these people and divorcing yourself from, these people and realizing first, they want you to fall into this trap, a political trap, a social trap. They want you to believe all these things they tell you, allowing them to teach your children all this garbage when they go to school. And they know better than you. It's just the first step in the state taking over control and allowing, and they do it through destroying the family. And that's exactly what's going on in America. So beware. Know where it comes from. And I'm giving you some pointers on where it does come from. Okay, we got to get into this story today because I want to finish it. And it's I've been doing this 2 days, and it's really sad when you start thinking about what they did in Serbia between 1941 and 1944. And it's really interesting because people don't even think about it. Because they've been told so much about the Holocaust and Hitler, You don't hear much about what happened in Russia, the 30 million people that were killed there under Stalin. Stalin, you might as well call him Father Joseph Stalin, S.J. And we've done a number of stories on his connections to the Jesuit order. And yesterday I talked about the priest who started the School of Foreign Service, the Jesuit priest who started the School of Foreign Service in Georgetown University, right next to the Vatican. And I hope you looked him up, because he played a major part in making sure that Mr. Stalin became the head of Russia and paved the way for mass genocide. So they know how to do this. They know how to play the game. And by the way, for anybody of you who listened to my show, I think a couple weeks ago, and I've talked about this before, who think that the Jesuits didn't create socialism, think again. And all I'm going to tell you is the Paraguay reductions in the 1600s. Look it up. So when you hear Ocasio-Cortez and all those people talking about the Jesuit... Oh, it's going. There it's going. It's funny, my computer just stopped and I got all mixed up. But it is working. Okay, good. But when you hear her talking about socialism, don't forget who her bosses are. And tell her to give credit to the Jesuits for this. And you can bet there's some connections there. Because this woman came out of nowhere. And that's a funny... Remember the story about her auditioning for the part? Right. That's how she became a congresswoman. They held an open audition. And she was cute enough, I guess she talked good enough that they could feed her all her lines. And she's doing a good job. And we've talked and we've shown, documentation on how that really is the truth. So anyway, I want to get into this story. And I only got 2 minutes here, but I'll just set it up again. So we have this mass genocide going on between 1941 and 1944. And when you start talking to people about it and you mention it, people don't know about it because it's been hidden, covered up by the Vatican as well. And all the attention has been put on Hitler. But when you start talking about the truth behind Hitler, who actually wrote Mein Kampf, who actually was his mentor, you start getting the truth behind the scenes that you don't get anywhere else. It's the same thing when you talk about Abraham Lincoln and his death, or John Kennedy. You only get the story they tell you, or all the other stories that come out, but no one makes the connection to the people I'm talking about here. And the ones that do, and there are some people, you don't hear much about it. So it's a tough road to get this story out. But we have to get, we're going to spend the next half hour, I'm going to finish up this segment, and get back to this genocide between 1941 and 1944 of the Serbian people. Well, Jews were involved, the gypsies. It was just an incredible story that we've talked about the last couple days. And a priest, we talked about all the priests' involvement in actually killing people. But the Archbishop Stefanik, who's been made a saint, I mean, when you hear what he did, and he was made a saint by Pope John Paul II, but boy, isn't that the pot calling the kettle black when you know his background. But anyway, we're going to be back right after this break. Go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com. You can get shows going back well over a decade in what I call the Vatican-led Jesuit New World Order. Okay, back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the Third Temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the Third Temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal, and let's get right to it here. I want to talk, last show, I want to do this week on the Serbian Genocide back in 1941. And I talked about this Archbishop Stefanik, who played a major role in this neutralization of any possible opposition to the genocide in the Vatican. So, in 1941, he actively advocated for diplomatic recognition of the independent state of Croatia by the Vatican, which later they agreed to. And this is the state of Croatia led by Anton Pavelic, and the Ustase, who were the killers and the mass murderers, along with the Vatican priests. And some nuns, I hear. Yep, we'll talk to those people who actually were witnesses. But what's more, Pope Pius XII would meet delegations of the Ustase in Rome, and he respected them unbelievably. And although Rome did receive reports of their atrocities, he didn't give a damn. Due to the diplomatic efforts of Stepinac, coupled with the Pope's total declination to believe these reports, they remained a voice crying in the wilderness, as it were. As a result, Pavelic didn't worry about the position of the Vatican, and a representative of the independent state of Croatia, his name was Nikola Rusovic, wrote that during a conversation with the Undersecretary of the State of the Vatican, Giovanni Battista Montini, about the crimes of the Ustase, the regime later noted that the Vatican regards any negative information about Croatia with suspicion. The only person in the Vatican to protest against the genocide of the Serbs was the learned theologian Eugene de Seront. But he was treated as an idiot, banished, and was told by the leaders of the Vatican not to trust this man. Pope Pius XII turned a deaf ear to this man, to this evidence, not only because he knew the truth and he was behind it, but also because of his servile attitude to Hitler and Mussolini, but also because he admired the zeal of Anton Pavlik and his subjects in spreading the true faith among schismatics, and was impressed by his brutal determination to implement a full-scale Catholic project, which would become a stronghold against the socialist menace as contrasted to the liberalism of Western democracies. Moreover, he was attracted by a chance to do away with the main rival of Roman Catholicism in the Western Balkans, namely the Serbian Orthodox Church. As for the hundreds of thousands of murdered Orthodox Christians, he thought that, quote, the war will write off all sins, and the victors are not judged. And this is supposedly the Vicar of Christ. It gets really crazy, doesn't it? After the end of the war, the Vatican took an active part in the ratlines operation to help the Ustase, including Catholic clerics, escape justice, just like they did in Nazi Germany. Among those who helped the Ustase in Rome were the Austrian, a Croat by descent, and gives the names here, Aloyse Gudal, and the Pontifical Croatian College of St. Jerome, headed by a guy by the name of Krunoslav Draganovic. Through his support, a large number of Ustase leaders and clerics who had collaborated with them, headed by Bishop Ivan Saric, fled from Croatia with the stolen gold and hid in Rome. They brought it all to Rome. Remember we talked about the lawsuit that was recently, this thing was in the Ninth Circuit up in San Francisco, Alperin v. Vatican Bank, for 10 years until the judges said the Vatican didn't do business here and there was no jurisdiction given to the attorney who was fighting to get reparations from the Vatican for the atrocities, and he was representing family members of those who were killed. So, if you remember, one of his depositions was an intelligence officer who worked there and knew about the Vatican ratlines and told eyewitness reports of them bringing in the gold and using the Vatican to give new identities to these people who were actually killers. So through the support of these people, Pavlik, it cannot be ruled out that Pavlik escaped punishment due to Pope Pius XII's intercession. When an American intelligence officer tried to hunt for the bloody another Poglanovic, the pontiff insisted on his deportation, so that he's protecting these killers. Nevertheless, a number of butchers, including those in Krasic, received some punishment. After the war, the Yugoslavian authorities arrested some priests who had been involved in the crimes. So here we have point-blank information that they were solid information. Several hundred Catholic priests were prosecuted, and after a proper legal trial, many of them were sentenced to capital punishment. Of course, Archbishop Stefanik was brought to justice too. He was sentenced to 16 years of imprisonment and hard labor for his collaboration and involvement in the genocide. However, he served only 5 years, was exempted from penal servitude, and was later confined to house arrest at his native village of Krasic. By the standards of those stern days, he got off with nothing more than a good fright. In time, he was declared a martyr and the victim of communism. In 1998, Stepinac was beatified, made a saint by John Paul II, and in 2015, canonized by Pope Francis. The canonization of Stepinac is tantamount to spitting on the hundreds of thousands of victims of the genocide unleashed by the Ustase and admitting to the involvement of the Vatican in these crimes. Pope Pius XII didn't react to the terror in Croatia, albeit he was well informed about it. The Pope didn't excommunicate any of the executioners, while he excommunicated all communists in 1949. On top of that, this pontiff was a long-standing supporter of the inhumane Ustase regime in the world arena and preferred to help hundreds, if not thousands, of war criminals escape through the Vatican ratlines. Amazing. Just getting away with murder, right? What do I say in this show? Why do these people get away with murder? You think I'm exaggerating? But how can we explain this humanity in utter contempt for Christian values? How do you explain it? There is a concept of spiritual delusion in the Orthodox tradition, which has to do with the demonic influence and deception. It was not without reason that Christ warned people, and I'm reading from a quote from this website now. It's called orthochristian.com. They said, "Yea, the time cometh that whoever killeth you will think that he doth it service God." Unfortunately, this spiritual blindness is a natural phenomenon in the Roman Catholic Church and theology, specifically in its teaching of salvation through good works. For good works are tested by their aim, and as we know, the end, in this case, justifies the means. That's going on every day. That statement, you can look at situations going on in Washington, D.C. today, and it's the same darn thing. These butchers most probably believed that they were martyrs of conscience by taking upon themselves all these sins for the sake of a greater and brighter future of the Croatian nation. And the same thing's going to happen here in America, and for the triumph of the holy Catholic faith. Justifying themselves, they well may have recalled some verses of the Old Testament like this one. "The righteous shall rejoice when he seeth the vengeance. He shall wash his feet in the blood of the wicked." And it's quite possible that while committing mass rape and murder, they would enter in a state of religious ecstasy. Wow. Quite interesting, right? So, there's a lot of stories about this genocide that never gets told. So try to do some research on your own. And I'm going to move on to some other things. But let me see. What do I want to end this show on today? So anyway, do research the Serbian Genocide 1941-1944. Now, in one of my shows, or many of my shows, I've talked about sun worship. And I've talked about how even the heliocentric model that we believe, hook, line, and sinker from the time you were in grade school, seeing the big globe on the teacher's desk, it's basically a form of sun worship. They changed the natural order of what God did, even explained it in the Bible, if you're a Christian, and decided that the earth revolves around the sun and it's a big ball. And basically, that is a form of sun worship. And I'm not going to get into my belief system, but I am going to tell you that I have no belief one way or the other whether the earth is round or flat. However, the facts that I've researched lead me to believe that something's up at Denmark and Nassau, and they've been giving us a lot of falsehoods and a lot of theories that don't make any sense. Now, for every time you try to question whether the earth is flat or round, you're going to get belief systems in the way of the research. Now, I found a lot of facts that show that the earth is round, but that it doesn't revolve around the sun. And I found facts that show it does. Now, if you look at those facts, a lot of the facts regarding the theory that Nassau pushes, and the push, has been pushed since Copernicus, you find that there's very little, it's theory, there's very little factual basis to it. Now, on the other side of the coin, when you look at those who have researched the flat earth, and those who have researched the stationary earth with the sun and the moon revolving around the earth, as depicted in the Bible, you find a lot of factual evidence, exactly scientific evidence showing that this exists, that gravity doesn't exist. Many, many things are interesting. So what I'm saying is when you start looking at the facts, Don't let your belief system get in the way. And whether you die thinking it's round or flat, it's not going to make any difference. You'll get a chance to take a look at it then. But anyway, just don't fall for the NASA's line of BS. That's all I'm telling you, along with Einstein. So what about the sun? Where did this come from? The adoration of the sun was one of the earliest and most natural forms of religious expression. Many people grew up that way, worshiping the sun. Come on, sun, let's go out and worship the sun. Complex modern theologies are merely involvements and amplifications of this simple aboriginal belief. The primitive mind, recognizing the beautiful power of the solar orb, adored it as the proxy of the supreme deity, right? So basically, people looked up and said, that's what God is. The sun is God. And concerning the origin of the sun worship, Albert Pike, remember who Albert Pike is? He wrote a book, you got to read it. It's called Morals and Dogma. And if you don't believe in the occult and these people, the Vatican Jesuits and all of these people following into this system, then read his book. And why, I always ask, do they have a big, huge statue of this guy in Washington, D.C.? It's interesting. And he said in Morals and Dogma about sun worship, to them, Aboriginal peoples, the sun was the innate fire of bodies, the fire of nature, author of life, heat, and ignition. He was, and he calls the sun he, was to them, and that would really get politically correct people mad today, right? You can't say he or she, okay? He was to them the efficient cause of all generations, for without him there was no movement. There was nothing, no existence, no form. Without the sun there's nothing. He's God, he'd say. He was to them an immense, invisible, imperishable, and everywhere present. It was their need of light and of his creative energy that was felt by all men, and nothing was more fearful to them than his absence. His beneficent influences caused his identification with the principle of good, and the Brahma, and the Hindus, and the Mithras of the Persians, and the Atham, Amun, Pitha, Osiris of the Egyptians, of Bel, of the Chaldeans, of Adonai of the Phoenicians, the Adonis, and the Apollo of the Greeks. All this, all the names I just gave you, where the gods created worshiping the sun. And all of this became the personification of the sun, the regenerating principal image of that which perpetrates and gives rejuvenation to the entire world's existence. These people today worship the sun. I've said it many times. You'll read it in Morals and Dogma. They got a statue in Washington of this man. They have an obelisk representing what supposedly is freedom in our country, and that's a worshiping of Osiris, of Isis. Okay? Read about it. There's one in Washington. There's many obelisks all over the world. In fact, there's one I was traveling through Mexico. There's an obelisk near the border. So they're all over the place. And there's one in Rome, the main ones, Rome, London, and the Vatican. And they form a great triumvirate. We've done many stories on that. But here we go. So we got this sun worship dating way back to all these gods we talked about. And that's where all this perversion's coming to today. I'm not going to tell you that, of course. But among all the nations of antiquity, altars, mounds, and temples were dedicated to the worship of the sun. The ruins of these sacred places yet remain. The Vatican, folks, the Vaticanus was built on a pagan temple. Why? They could build it anywhere. Why did they choose a pagan temple if they're not pagans? It makes absolutely no sense when you really think about it. Okay? So, the ruins of these sacred places yet remain. Notable among them being the pyramids of the Yucatan in Egypt, the snake mounds of the American Indians, the ziggurats of Babylon and Chaldea, the round towers of Ireland, and the massive rings of uncut stone in Britain and Normandy, the Tower of Babel, which according to the scriptures was built so that man might reach up to God or the sun, and was probably an astronomical observatory. Many early priests and prophets, both pagan and Christian, were versed in astronomy and astrology. Their writings are best understood when we read in the light of those ancient sciences. With the growth of man's knowledge of the Constitution, of the heavenly bodies, as we heard through Nassau, okay, as astronomical principles and terminology were introduced into this religious system. The gods were given plain names, given thrones, the celestial bodies being named after the deities assigned to them. So we have Nassau, whoever created, they tell us there's all these planets and they give them names. They're all named after the ancient deities. The fixed stars were divided into constellations, and though these constellations wandered the sun and its planets later with their accompanying satellites. The sun, as supreme among the celestial bodies, visible to the astronomers of antiquity, was assigned to the highest of the gods and became symbolic of the supreme authority of the Creator himself. From a deep philosophic consideration of the powers and principles of the sun has come the concept of the Trinity as it is understood in the world today. The tenet. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's move on. I've got it under control. So the sun is the supreme being. The tenet of the triune divinity is not peculiar to Christian or Mosaic theology, but forms a conspicuous part of the dogma of the greatest religions of both the ancient and modern times. The Persians, Hindus, Babylonians, Egyptians had trinities. In every instance, these represented the threefold form of one supreme intelligence. In modern Masonry, the deity is symbolized by what? By equilateral triangle. Its three sides, representing the primary manifestations of the Eternal One, who is himself, represented as a tiny flame, called by the Hebrews Yad, and the Teutonic mystic calls the Trinity of the three witnesses, by means of which the invisible is made known to the visible, tangible universe. The origin of the Trinity is obvious to anyone who will observe the daily manifestations of the sun. The orb, being the symbol of light, has three distinct phases: rising, midday, and the setting. The philosophers therefore divided the life of all things into three distinct parts: growth, maturity, and decay. Between the twilight dawn and the twilight of evening is the high noon of resplendent glory. God the Father, the creator of the world, is symbolized by the dawn. His color is blue because the sun rising in the morning is veiled in the blue mist. God the Son, the illuminating one, sent to bear witness of his Father before all worlds, is the celestial globe at noonday, radiant and magnificent. The man Lion of Judah, the golden-haired Savior of the world. Yellow is his color, and his power is without end. God, the Holy Ghost, is the sunset phase, when the orb of day, robed in the flaming red, rests for the moment upon the horizon line, and then vanishes into the darkness of night to wander in the lower worlds, and later rise again triumphant from the embrace of darkness. To the Egyptians, The sun was the symbol of immortality. For while it died each night, it rose again in each ensuing dawn. Not only has the sun this activity, but it also has its annual pilgrimage, during which time it passes successfully through the 12 celestial houses of the heavens, remaining in each for 30 days. Added to those, it has a third path of travel, which is called the procession of the equinoxes, in which it goes around the globe, the zodiac, through the 12 signs at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. Concerning the annual passage of the sun through the 12 houses of the heavens, boy, I don't have time. I'd like to get into this more. But what I'm trying to do here, no offense to Christianity, of course, but I'm looking at this from a different point of view of where these people really get their beliefs that live today in this kind of what I call the Vatican-led New World Order, a world that we have no idea about. We see traces of it when we talk about going into the skull and bones activities of those at Yale, some of the occult activities that go on. But I think we really have to go back and look at sun worship. That's who they worship. They're going back to these old Egyptian, these old ways. That's all I wanted to say before the weekend. Have a good weekend. Say, love your family, enjoy yourself, and I'll be back Monday on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.